Growing up, there are some influences that are forced upon us. There's some influences that maybe come into our lives accidentally, and there are some that we were seeking out for ourselves or that we selected for ourselves. I think someone like Tana Mongeau, she both represents and actually is someone who pieced her personality together from powerful influences that she sought out and selected on the internet, primarily here on YouTube, and then she went on to become someone on YouTube who influenced other young people. Don't get me wrong, I mean, some of the major influences in her life, like the rapper Lil Wayne, they existed on the radio, but it wasn't through the medium of radio that Lil Wayne's influence became powerful in her life, and then a whole bunch of C-list and D-list celebrities, most of whom you will have never heard of, and I never heard of, unless you notice them being mentioned in Tana Mongeau's videos. She, put together a bird's nest. She found those influences and put them together, and in so doing, with the passage of time, she really she poured herself into a mold of her own creation. And we all do that to some extent. If you grew up in a Christian cult where you were beaten and whipped for anything you thought or said that was contrary to the wishes of the cult leader, kind of another story. Yeah. So to some extent, to a limited extent, each of us grows up this way. And I think, if you're really writing an autobiography, examining your own childhood and your own development, if you're looking back at those things, it's very difficult to remember accurately in what cases an influence was forced upon you, perhaps came into your life by accident or by chance, and to what extent it was something you were seeking out, or something you selected, something that you made meaningful by your own volition, however imperfect as a young people, as opposed to something that was made meaningful for you by circumstances or by an outside authority. For me, there's one I remember really clearly, a comment from the rapper Ice-T that was on Canadian television. It was played many, many times on Canadian television. Back in those days, Canadian television was kind of a smaller place than American television or European television. There was an interview that Ice-T gave, presumably to the New Music or one of the other Canadian programs, where he just stopped and reflected that a lot of the time younger rappers, complained to him that there was some kind of conspiracy in the industry, the music industry, to prevent them from getting ahead, to prevent them from being successful. Now, again, my point here is not that what he says in this topic is meaningful in some self-evident way, that it's profound in a way that's going to reach you right now in my audience. My point is, this was obviously something I was already wanting to hear, I was already looking for, I was already thinking about, and this made a really big impact on me. Maybe because it was affirming a lot of stuff, I was already animated about or concerned about. But he went on to say in this interview, he said, look, I wake up every day and I talk to people in the industry, and all of them are looking for new recording artists who can sell more records than Ice-T, who can perform for venues for bigger audiences and do better than Ice-T. He said, so if you're out there and you can rap, like Ice-T, or you can rap better, it's just not true that there's a conspiracy against you in the industry. He didn't use these words, but on the contrary, this whole industry is like a conspiracy to help you get ahead, and you're just not, you're not appreciating that. And he said some words to that. See, I don't even think he said this. I think this is what I added to it. This is my interpretation. This is what I put onto it. What I really got from this was he was fed up dealing with young people who were looking for a back door into the recording industry, who were looking for a way to trick their way in, a way to use connections, a way to ask him for help, to get him set up with a meeting. And he was saying, don't use the back door, use the front door. Like, don't try to win through trickery or connections or favors. Just be good enough as a rapper, as a musician, as a performer, that you can move the crowd, you can entertain an audience of 3,000 people, or you can sell some records or whatever it is, and then go in the front door. Stop hanging around trying to get in the back door. And it's funny, but this came up in my life as a young person again and again. I remember really vividly, this was my last year of high school. I had a bunch of conversations along these lines, but there was a young guy. He was his family was Muslim. From my conversation with him, I felt he was an atheist, so he seemed to be ex-Muslim or what have you. And what he really wanted to be, I think, was a science fiction writer. And I remember him asking me, why he would ask me. He asked me, and he used exactly those words. He asked me about a back door into the publishing industry. Now, okay, so obviously we were both young. I don't know what age we were. Both in our last year of high school. And I said to him, in effect, look, you're young. You're at the beginning of your life. You're at the beginning of your career. Why now would you be talking about a backdoor into the publishing industry? Why would you be talking about cheating your way into publishing a book or a story or getting ahead in science fiction? You know, like, I can understand if you get to 55 years old, 65 years old, and you've been writing science fiction for years, and you're really convinced that your science fiction is good, but it's not reaching an audience, that you start looking for some kind of friends or connections or conspiracy, some kind of backdoor, so you can get that outcome, you can get that access without going in the front door. But now for you, whatever age we were, I don't know, 17 or whatever it was, you know, why aren't you looking at, you know, building up the craft, building up your portfolio, working on your writing, doing the research, whatever it is, so that you really are the next Frank Herbert or George R.R. Martin or whatever it is. Whatever it is you aspire to be, why aren't you interested in actually becoming that, in actually being that, instead of looking, you know, for the back door, instead of looking for a shortcut, instead of looking to use connections, so that you can, in effect, I mean, what this is really about. So why are you looking to get the trappings of success? Why are you looking to get the trappings of fame instead of actually earning what it is that's made these other people famous? Okay? Now, guys, some people are watching this video. It's the first video they've ever seen on my channel. Some people, you know, you've been watching my videos for years and you already know what I'm about. You know, this trope, this thing, you know, it came out of a momentary interview with a rapper. My life has had nothing to do with rap music. I mean, it's not my field. I'm not a recording artist. I'm not someone involved in that world. I'm not involved in the performing arts. You know, you might think this is just, you know, a childhood memory. But it's something that came up again and again and again. Even in academia, even like in the formal context of my meeting with a professor who's offering to get me an MA in linguistics, I would say in my terms through a backdoor, saying, hey, look, we can set you up so you get this master's degree in linguistics, and that's going to help you go ahead and do what you want to do. And where I'm asking back, yeah, you can get me a master's degree, but how am I actually going to learn this language? Like, how am I going to do the work that the MA is supposed to represent? How am I going to do the real thing? Like, I'm not interested in having the degree and the degree being hollow, being just the trappings of learning. I'm interested in the actual learning. I'm not interested in talking about the actual learning process. And, you know, in that particular case, there was no good answer forthcoming for that. No, what they were really talking about was going through the motions of getting me an MA in linguistics, but giving me absolutely zero language education and not even being able to supervise that or what have you. And this is not the only example of its kind. In several other disciplines where I was talking about getting an MA or first getting an MA and then getting a PhD, there's a lot of talk about, frankly, this kind of conspiracy to give you the credentials of learning without you actually doing the learning. Anyway, when I look at Tana Mongeau today, this is 2018, what I see is obviously pretty sad. Tana Mongeau presented to all of us an example of someone who was, as she says again and again, born dirt poor, terrible education, dropped out of school, learned everything she knows by watching garbage on YouTube. Again, these kind of self-selected, self-reinforcing, you know, sources of cultural and philosophical influence, put together her identity from these bits and pieces. And then she had this opportunity to be more, to be something better, you know, morally and ethically. And, you know, her flirtation with veganism was all obviously a part of that. And in terms of her career and her financial situation and everything else, she had this opportunity handed to her, which is really much more rare than 1 in a million. She had the potential to symbolize something much more positive for her audience and to actually be something much more positive for herself, for her audience, for anyone else who cares. And instead, exactly what she got caught up in was having a crowd of people standing in the sun screaming to get in. You know, it was the crowd outside the barrier. It was, you know, vanity of vanities. It wasn't even the fame. It was, anyway, the worst, most counterproductive elements of having people thronging, to see you, to hear your voice. And at the same time, these recent events, she obviously put absolutely no thought and absolutely no effort into what is it these people are going to hear when they get in the door. What is the show you're putting on? What's the food and drink you're offering? I mean, ultimately, she's offering like a concert with no music at this point. What is the product supposed to be here? What is the performance? And so on. Those things were going unthought of, and she was utterly caught up in the trappings of fame. So, look, guys, Tana Mongeau, she really is part of my personal experience here on YouTube in a really weird and dynamic way. I have, within the last year, watched a bunch of Tana Mongeau videos, with my girlfriend. And several years ago, one of the first videos that really got my name out there within the vegan demi-monde, now got over, I think, 14,000, 15,000 views, was a video directly answering and talking to Tana Mongeau. And, all of us on YouTube are within 6 degrees of separation of each other. I remember when she did a video event with Charles Marlowe, formerly known as the Vegan Cheetah and this stuff. That's back when she was vegan herself, and there was some, she was part of the demi-monde, the same demi-monde I was in, and so on. And, I say all the time in discussions of ethics on this channel that ultimately, you have to ask yourself, who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to become? And it's a subtle distinction, but, the answer, famous is not an answer to that question. Famous isn't who you want to be. And it may seem like a small step, but what do you want to be famous for? What do you want to be appreciated for? Obviously Tana Mongeau was just too stupid to realize the opportunity she had, and she's instead just become another example of someone presented with an extraordinary opportunity who squandered it.